What if everything you believe about success, money, effort, and limitation is wrong, not because you lack intelligence or opportunity, but because you have never been taught how the laws governing your own mind actually work? Most people never pause long enough to confront this question honestly. They rush past it because it threatens the stories they have built to protect themselves from responsibility. They prefer to believe success is external, random, unfair, or reserved for a chosen few because that belief relieves them of the burden of inner discipline. Napoleon Hill understood that this avoidance is not accidental. It is psychological self-defense. If success is governed by internal law, then failure cannot be blamed on circumstance. And that realization is unbearable for the undisciplined mind. Think and Grow Rich was never about money. Money was only the visible measurement of an invisible process. Hill used wealth as proof because it leaves a clear trail. You can argue philosophy, you cannot argue results. What he uncovered was that the same laws that produce riches produce confidence, authority, clarity, influence, and purpose. Money follows the same rules as achievement in any form. First comes thought, then belief, then decision, then persistence, then result. Reverse the order and the system collapses. The world conditions you from childhood to look outward for causes. You are taught to adjust to reality instead of shaping it. You are taught to be reasonable, cautious, and agreeable instead of decisive, focused, and self-directed. You are taught to seek permission before action and validation before belief. None of this is accidental. A population that does not understand its own mental power is easy to manage, easy to distract, and easy to keep average. Hill discovered that all achievement begins with definiteness of purpose, not vague wishing, not passive hoping. A definite purpose is a precise internal command. It tells the subconscious mind what to organize around. Without it, the mind drifts. A drifting mind absorbs fear, doubt, and limitation by default. Drift is the natural enemy of success. Most people are not defeated. They are unfocused. A definite purpose is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. When your aim is clear, hesitation becomes obvious. Procrastination becomes visible. Distraction becomes expensive. This is why many avoid defining what they want. Ambiguity feels safer than commitment. But ambiguity weakens belief. The mind cannot generate faith around something it does not clearly see. Hill emphasized that purpose must be fused with burning desire. Desire is not preference. It is not curiosity. It is an emotional state so intense that the idea of failure becomes unacceptable. Burning desire does not come from inspiration. It comes from decision reinforced by repetition. When you repeatedly impress a clear purpose upon your mind with emotion, the desire intensifies. When desire intensifies, belief begins to form. Belief is the most misunderstood force in human psychology. Most people think belief is something you either have or you do not. Hill revealed that belief is constructed. It is built through autosuggestion, emotionalization, and action. The subconscious mind accepts whatever is repeatedly impressed upon it with feeling. It does not judge truth. It does not analyze probability. It executes instructions. This is where most lives are quietly sabotaged. People allow fear-based thoughts to repeat unchecked. Worry, doubt, and imagined failure are impressed upon the subconscious daily, often hourly. Over time, these impressions harden into belief. The individual then calls this belief realism. In truth, it is programming. Fear is not an instinct in modern life. It is a habit. It is learned through repetition. Hill identified fear as the primary force that paralyzes initiative. Fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of failure. These fears do not arrive suddenly. They are conditioned into the mind through years of observation, conversation, and emotional experience. And what is learned can be unlearned. Faith is not blind optimism. Faith is belief energized by desire and reinforced by action. Faith is the state in which the mind expects success and therefore behaves in ways that produce it. Fear expects loss and therefore behaves in ways that invite it. The mind moves toward what it consistently expects. This is not metaphor, it is psychological law. Hill taught that autosuggestion is the bridge between the conscious and subconscious mind. Whatever you repeatedly tell yourself with emotion becomes instruction. Most people use autosuggestion unconsciously and destructively. They rehearse their limitations. They repeat their doubts. They narrate their failures. Then they wonder why progress feels heavy and inconsistent. Conscious autosuggestion requires discipline. It requires selecting thoughts deliberately instead of reacting emotionally. It requires repetition even when results are not immediate. This is where persistence enters. Persistence is faith extended through time. It is the refusal to allow temporary defeat to become permanent belief. Most people quit mentally long before they quit physically. They continue showing up while internally surrendering. Hill understood that the subconscious mind responds not to words alone, but to conviction demonstrated through persistence. When you continue despite resistance, the subconscious accepts that the goal is non-negotiable. Once that acceptance occurs, behavior aligns automatically. Decision is the sharp edge of success. Indecision is the breeding ground of fear. Hill observed that successful people make decisions quickly and change them slowly. Unsuccessful people delay decisions and change them often. This pattern is not about intelligence. It is about self-trust. Faith produces decisiveness. Fear produces hesitation. The moment you decide definitively, the mind shifts. Energy that was scattered across possibilities concentrates. Doubt loses leverage. External opinions weaken. Momentum begins. This is why decision feels dangerous to the fearful mind. It closes escape routes. It forces commitment. Self-discipline is the structure that holds belief in place. Without discipline, belief leaks under pressure. Discipline governs attention, emotion, and behavior. It does not eliminate desire, it directs it. Hill made it clear that no one drifts into success. Drift always moves downward. Discipline must be imposed deliberately. Imagination is the workshop of the mind. Used correctly, it visualizes achievement, rehearses success, and prepares responses to challenge. Used incorrectly, it manufactures fear. The mind does not distinguish between imagined defeat and real defeat when emotion is present. This is why fear feels real even in safety. Faith trains imagination to serve purpose instead of anxiety. The invisible mental forces Hill described are not mystical entities. They are the combined effect of thought, emotion, repetition, and action operating over time. When these forces are aligned, results appear inevitable. When they are scattered, effort feels futile. Most people work hard but think weakly. They exhaust themselves trying to overpower life instead of aligning with its laws. Hill's philosophy reverses this. It demands that you master the inner world first. Once the mind is governed, action becomes effective. Think and grow rich is a warning disguised as a promise. It warns that if you do not consciously direct your thoughts, they will be directed for you. By fear, by opinion, by environment, by habit. And the result will be a life of quiet compromise. The law Hill revealed does not negotiate, it responds. It does not care about intention without action. It does not reward hope without discipline. It does not excuse ignorance once awareness is gained. Once you understand that your dominant thoughts shape your outcomes, you are responsible whether you accept it or not. This is why the book unsettles people. It removes the comfort of denial. It exposes the mind as the source of both limitation and liberation. It insists that success is not granted. It is assumed through belief and enforced through persistence. To apply this law is to accept that your inner world must be governed with the same seriousness as your external obligations. It means you no longer indulge fear as entertainment. You no longer rehearse doubt as caution. You no longer delay decision as intelligence. You act with purpose. You think with intention. You persist without negotiation. This is not positive thinking. It is disciplined thinking. It is mental warfare against the habits that have quietly limited you for years. It is the recognition that before money, before achievement, before recognition, there must be inner authority. And that authority begins the moment you stop asking whether this law works and Start asking whether you are willing to live as if it does. Most people never reach the second stage of application because it requires confronting a truth that is uncomfortable and relentless. Your thoughts, your beliefs, and your inner dialogue are far more powerful than any external circumstance. Napoleon Hill observed that people expend tremendous energy blaming the world, circumstances, or other people for their lack of results, while never inspecting the true cause hidden within their own mental habits. The law revealed in Think and Grow Rich is deceptively simple. What dominates your mind determines the course of your life, but its simplicity is lethal to the unprepared. Most fail not because life is unfair, but because the mind, unchecked and undisciplined, has been trained to fear, doubt, and vacillate. You have been programmed since childhood to defer, to hesitate, to accept limitation as reality. And this programming has become so habitual that it masquerades as intelligence, caution, or realism. Hill's first warning is harsh. If you do not consciously reprogram your mind, it will continue to govern you without mercy, guiding you into mediocrity with the same conviction it once reserved for fear. At this stage, you must examine the raw mechanics of desire, for desire is the energy that powers all transformation, but not any desire, burning desire. Hill distinguished between casual longing and obsessive intent. Casual longing allows compromise. It negotiates with distraction and fatigue. Burning desire consumes compromise, refuses doubt, and insists upon manifestation. It is a furnace of thought and emotion fused together, shaping the subconscious mind to accept a single command. Achieve this purpose no matter what obstacles arise. Desire fuels persistence, discipline, and imagination, and it is the first tangible proof that the law is responding to you. But desire alone is insufficient. Desire without belief remains fantasy. Desire without clarity is chaotic. Desire without action is wasted energy. The mind does not move randomly toward fulfillment. It follows structure, principle, and internal conviction. Belief is the critical bridge. Most people assume belief is inherent or a matter of faith in the spiritual sense. Hill taught that belief is constructed, and it is constructed through repetition, emotion, and association. The subconscious mind cannot distinguish between what is imagined vividly and what is experienced tangibly when strong emotion is present. Here lies both the danger and the power. Fear can be impressed just as easily as faith. Worry, doubt, and imagined failure are no less real to the subconscious than visions of success. The individual who ignores this principle is building limitation as deliberately as a mason lays bricks. Selly, the person who masters autosuggestion, begins to direct the subconscious with precision, planting thoughts that will grow into action, persistence, and results. Autosuggestion is more than mere repetition of affirmations. It requires emotional intensity, conviction, and consistency. It is the disciplined instruction of the subconscious mind, impressing upon it the images and expectations you intend to realize. Hill emphasized that the subconscious mind operates mechanically. It does not negotiate morality, probability, or convenience. It executes the program it is given. If your conscious mind communicates fear, hesitation, and scarcity, the subconscious will act with ruthless fidelity to these instructions. If it is programmed with faith, desire, and clarity, it will act with equal inevitability to bring those intentions into manifestation. But this requires discipline. Discipline is the structural backbone of belief. Desire without discipline is chaos. Belief without discipline is fragile. The untrained mind is easily distracted, vulnerable to opinion, persuasion, and circumstance. Hill argued that self-discipline is not merely willpower, it is the deliberate management of thought, emotion, and action to maintain alignment with purpose. Every idle thought allowed, every fear indulged, every hesitation accepted without inspection weakens the program being impressed upon the subconscious. The mind's power is precise. It obeys instruction, not wishful thinking. To master the law, you must assume responsibility for every thought, word, and action, knowing that the subconscious mind is absorbing all of it and acting accordingly. Decision is the next critical factor. Hill observed that the inability to decide quickly and change slowly is a hallmark of failure. Fear thrives in indecision, Indecision leaves the mind suspended, vulnerable, and inefficient. By contrast, decisive action crystallizes thought into motion, converts belief into habit, and reinforces desire with tangible steps. Every moment spent delaying decision is a moment in which fear accumulates strength, embedding doubt into the subconscious mind and eroding the energy that could be harnessed for progress. Mastery of the law requires you to cultivate decisiveness, not impulsivity, but rapid, informed decision reinforced by commitment and action. Persistence is the proving ground. Desire, belief, autosuggestion, and discipline can all exist in theory, but without persistence, they dissolve when resistance appears. Hill stressed that temporary defeat is inevitable. The unprepared mind interprets it as a verdict rather than feedback. Persistence converts obstacles into information. It teaches the mind that temporary circumstances do not override internal command. Persistence is not motivation. It is discipline sustained over time. It is repetition without hesitation, action without indulgence in doubt, and the conscious refusal to allow fatigue, criticism, or discouragement to dim its purpose. It is here in persistence that thought crystallizes into circumstance. Imagination is the active workshop of the mind, where abstract ideas become concrete strategies. Fear constrains imagination, narrowing perception to worst-case scenarios and exaggerated threats. Faith expands imagination, revealing possibility, strategy, and the unseen pathways through obstacles. The imagination of the persistent, disciplined mind synthesizes information into actionable insight. It prepares for challenges before they arise and constructs mental rehearsals that make decisive action second nature. The subconscious, trained through repeated emotionally charged visualization and reinforced belief, begins to operate as a proactive partner rather than a reactive observer. Finally, mastery of the invisible forces completes the cycle. These forces, Hill's term for the mechanisms by which thought, emotion, and belief shape circumstance, respond only to clarity, consistency, and commitment. They are indifferent, mechanical, and impartial. They reward alignment and respond with precision, producing results that are inevitable to those who understand their operation. To apply the law effectively is to orchestrate your internal environment with the same rigor and seriousness with which an architect constructs a building. Every thought, desire, and decision must serve the structure of your purpose. Any deviation weakens the framework, slows the process, and gives fear an opening. At tip S stage, the law moves from theory to lived experience. The individual begins to notice that thought preceded circumstance, action followed belief, and persistence produced result. The mind, once chaotic and reactive, begins to operate as an integrated system. Opportunities, insight, and assistance begin to appear in response to internal alignment rather than external luck. Fear recedes because it no longer finds fertile ground. The law is operating. The individual has begun to function within it consciously. And once this understanding is internalized, a new question arises. Will you govern your mind deliberately or continue to drift under the instruction of circumstance and habit? The second stage of applying this law demands full awareness, disciplined repetition, and ruthless honesty with yourself. It requires that you identify every habit of thought that contradicts your purpose, replace it with deliberate instruction, and maintain it with unwavering consistency. You cannot delegate this responsibility. No external authority can impress the subconscious for you. You cannot wish it into being. You must construct it, protect it, and enforce it. And in doing so, you move from theoretical understanding into the psychological domain where all achievement begins, mastery over the mind itself. At this point, the framework of your inner world begins to reflect the outer reality you intend to create. But the process is exacting. Hill warned that the untrained mind reacts to delay, disappointment, and opposition by reverting to old programs. Persistence must therefore be exercised continually. Discipline must be enforced consistently. Thought must remain deliberate. Desire must be intense. Belief must be unwavering. And through this daily conscious application, the law ceases to be abstract and becomes the mechanism by which you transform not only circumstance but identity itself. This is the stage where most fail, not because the law does not work, but because they underestimate the rigor required. It is easy to read, think, and grow rich and nod at principles. It is infinitely harder to execute them relentlessly, without release and without excuse. To truly apply the law, you must think in terms of hours, not days, habits, not inspirations, systems, not wishful thinking. You must align every element of your mind, desire, belief, discipline, persistence, imagination, toward a single definite purpose. Only then does the invisible machinery begin to operate with certainty. Only then does thought truly precede reality. At this level, you begin to recognize that money, status, influence, and opportunity are not rewards. They are signals of alignment. They are reflections of inner order, not external favor. The law is impartial. It responds to mental mastery, not charm, luck, or accident. This insight changes the nature of effort itself. Action is no longer performed out of hope, desperation, or desire for approval. It is performed because it is the necessary, non-negotiable expression of purpose and internal command. The second stage of application is where thinking grows precise and the mind begins to operate as the engine of wealth and achievement, preparing the ground for results that cannot be ignored. This is where the individual begins to live the principle, not in theory, not in inspiration, not in fleeting motivation, but in persistent, disciplined, conscious engagement with the mind itself, knowing that every thought, every decision, every rehearsal, and every act of persistence is actively constructing reality according to the law Napoleon Hill revealed. The process is arduous, unforgiving, and exacting. Yet it is the only path by which thought becomes richness, desire becomes power, and purpose becomes destiny. The second stage demands full surrender to the mechanics of your own mind. You must observe, direct, correct, and reinforce. You must maintain alignment when the world offers distraction, uncertainty, or opposition. And through this daily deliberate practice, the inner law begins to operate with precision, laying the foundation for external achievement that will appear inevitable to any observer, yet is the natural consequence of mastery over the invisible forces of thought. Once the law begins to operate in the subconscious, the mind enters a new domain of intensity. This is where the inner battle shifts from understanding to embodiment, from theory to relentless execution. Napoleon Hill emphasized, "That thought alone is insufficient. It must be married to emotion, disciplined action, and persistence." At this stage, the individual begins to experience the full weight of responsibility that comes with knowing that every mental impression, every habitual thought, every choice carries consequence. The mind has become a battlefield where fear, doubt, and hesitation are confronted daily, not for elimination, but for subordination. Victory is not declared through the absence of fear, but through unwavering obedience to purpose. Persistence now evolves from effort into identity. The person no longer tries to persist. They become persistent. Daily actions, repeated under the supervision of conscious intention, have trained the subconscious mind to regard perseverance as a default condition. Fear has lost its dominion because the mind has internalized that failure is temporary, delay is instructional, and obstacles are neither permanent nor insurmountable. Hill observed that those who fail in life do so not because they are incapable, but because they are unwilling to persist long enough for the law to act fully. The individual at this stage realizes that consistency compounds silently, invisibly, but inexorably. Decision, which once seemed intimidating, now asserts itself as an internal standard. Indecision is no longer a habit because the individual has trained the mind to act deliberately and to adjust only when necessary. Decisions are anchored not in emotion, but in principle, in alignment with the definite purpose impressed upon the subconscious. The moment of hesitation is recognized instantly and corrected, not through moral struggle, but through practiced authority over thought. Hill insisted that decisiveness is the crucible of belief, the moment where theory meets execution. Without this, desire and faith remain inert. Imagination takes on its full creative function here. No longer a playground for fleeting ideas, imagination becomes the laboratory where challenges are rehearsed, strategies are constructed, and solutions are synthesized before circumstances demand them. Fear NCE constricted imagination, narrowing perception to danger and impossibility. Faith now expands it, revealing unseen pathways, generating opportunities, and envisioning outcomes that guide action. The imagination of the disciplined mind is precise, deliberate, and charged with expectation. Each visualization reinforces belief, trains behavior, and primes the subconscious for inevitability. At this level, autosuggestion transforms from a repetitive exercise into a lived mechanism. Every thought is deliberately framed, every statement internalized with emotion, every mental rehearsal executed with conviction. The subconscious mind no longer receives random input from fear, habit, or opinion. It receives directive, consistent, and emotionally charged instruction aligned with the definite purpose. Hill noted that the subconscious does not debate truth. It acts on input. This means that every repetition of doubt is as effective as every repetition of faith. The disciplined individual learns to govern this channel meticulously. The invisible mental forces which were once theoretical begin to manifest. Alignment between thought, desire, persistence, and disciplined action begins to produce tangible results. Opportunities appear in forms that feel synchronistic, but are in fact a consequence of consistent mental direction. Assistance arises not through coincidence, but through the law's impartial response to obedience. This stage reveals the profound principle that mental mastery precedes external mastery. Wealth, influence, and achievement are not gifts. They are the measurable consequences of internal alignment. Yet with this awakening comes the most subtle form of resistance, internal complacency. As small successes emerge, the mind may begin to relax, mistaking progress for security. Hill warned that the mind always tests the extent of its dominance. Without vigilant reinforcement, old habits of fear, doubt, and procrastination can reassert themselves in subtle ways, fleeting hesitation, indulgent worry, or distraction masquerading as creativity. The disciplined mind recognizes these signals immediately, correcting them not through guilt, but through renewed focus, deliberate action, and repetition of principle. Faith and belief now occupy the dominant position in the internal hierarchy. Fear is relegated to observation, its voice weakened by consistency, clarity, and emotional intensity. The individual perceives fear's warnings but no longer obeys them. Every decision, every plan, every action is filtered through purpose, evaluated against the definite goal, and executed with precision. Hill taught that this is the essence of mental authority, the ability to maintain direction regardless of emotional interference or external opinion. Self-discipline deepens at this stage into habitual structure. The individual's life becomes an orchestration of thought, action, and emotional regulation. Sleep, work, learning, and reflection are organized to reinforce purpose. Every interaction, every consumed idea, every minute spent is assessed for its alignment with the desired outcome. The unstructured mind is vulnerable. The disciplined mind converts every element of experience into fuel for the law. Persistence, once an effortful exercise, becomes natural because identity and action are synchronized. The mind does not debate obstacles, it integrates them. Temporary failure is no longer interpreted as personal limitation, but as feedback from the law. Adaptation occurs without emotional derailment. The individual understands that the subconscious mind only executes instructions it perceives as imperative. By maintaining clarity, consistency, and intensity of belief, every setback becomes a training tool, every challenge a reinforcement of purpose. Decision, discipline, imagination, and persistence converge to produce momentum. Hill noted that momentum is the most critical element of achievement because it renders opposition less effective and fear powerless. Momentum transforms minor actions into significant outcomes because each step reinforces belief, trains behavior, and aligns subconscious expectation with objective reality. This is the phase where thought begins to literally shape circumstance. External challenges which once provoked anxiety now provoke strategic response. The individual sees them not as threats but as mechanisms for refinement. Fear cannot hijack attention because the mind recognizes the difference. Between threat and signal, obstacle becomes opportunity, delay becomes incubation, resistance becomes rehearsal. Hill emphasized that this cognitive reorientation is rare precisely because it requires conscious control of attention, emotion, and expectation over long periods. Most people react, most people are governed by circumstance. The disciplined mind acts. Imagination, when fully integrated, functions as a predictive engine. It anticipates resistance, rehearses action, and identifies solutions before the problem manifests fully. The subconscious mind, now accurately programmed, begins to generate insight spontaneously. Intuition and inspiration are not accidents. They are the law at work, the mechanical outcome of precise, repeated mental direction. The individual experiences these moments as revelation, but Hill described them as inevitability. As these principles consolidate, fear of judgment, scarcity, or failure dissolves gradually. The individual no longer seeks external validation. Success is measured internally by alignment, execution, and growth. Hill insisted that lasting achievement is impossible without this internal compass because external conditions fluctuate endlessly. Only internal law produces consistency and predictable outcomes. At this stage, action becomes automatic within the structure of disciplined intent. Effort is focused, not frantic. Energy is efficient, not scattered. The mind, body, and emotion are aligned. Results begin to reflect the harmony. Hill noted that those who apply this level of mental mastery appear almost preternaturally effective because they operate in synchrony with forces most people ignore or misunderstand. But the work is continuous. Complacency is lethal. The mind always tests the boundaries of obedience, the intensity of belief, and the depth of desire. Temporary relaxation invites old patterns to reemerge subtly. Vigilance is required, not in panic, but in deliberate reinforcement of thought, emotion, and action. Each day is a new test of internal authority. Hill's law does not pause for convenience. It acts impartially, reflecting the degree to which internal alignment is maintained. This stage, where desire, belief, autosuggestion, discipline, decision, imagination, and persistence coalesce, is where true internal mastery manifests. It is no longer a theoretical construct. The individual feels it as clarity, inevitability, and momentum. External circumstances are no longer obstacles, they are mirrors reflecting the precise state of internal law. Wealth, influence, achievement, and opportunity appear as natural consequences. Fear, once dominant, is now a distant observer. The challenge here is psychological endurance. Hill warned that most people reach only this threshold and falter, not because they lack capacity, but because they underestimate the persistence required to maintain alignment. The mind will test the individual repeatedly through delays, setbacks, and distractions. Success depends on sustaining clarity, reinforcing belief, and exercising deliberate authority over thought and emotion without lapse. At this point, the individual experiences a profound internal shift. The mind becomes a disciplined engine of creation. Thought precedes action. Desire fuels execution. Belief guides perception. Persistence maintains trajectory. Decision eliminates hesitation. Imagination generates strategy. Discipline holds the system together. The law, once understood, operates with increasing inevitability, producing results proportionate to the intensity, consistency, and clarity of internal governance. Internal mastery now becomes identity. The individual no longer negotiates with fear, doubt, or distraction. These forces exist only as signals to be interpreted, not commands to be obeyed. The mind operates with precision, aligning every thought, every choice, every habit with purpose. Hill called this state the true threshold of wealth and success, when internal law governs all action and external achievement is merely the reflection of disciplined internal power. At this stage, the individual is ready for the final phase, translating internal mastery into sustained, visible, and decisive results, while confronting the ultimate responsibility of leadership over self, circumstance, and destiny. This is where the psychological intensity of Think and Grow Rich culminates in action that is unstoppable, inevitable, and uncompromising. Obedience to the law is now no longer a conscious exercise. It has become instinctive, an integrated aspect of being. The individual operates in a state of heightened awareness, where every thought, action, and emotion is observed, refined, and aligned with purpose. Napoleon Hill emphasized that those who truly apply, think, and grow rich do not merely act, they embody the principles until they become the governing framework of their existence. Fear no longer whispers in corners, and doubt cannot infiltrate because the mind is defended by clarity, belief, and disciplined repetition. The subconscious, previously a silent saboteur, now functions as a relentless ally, translating thought into precise, effective action. The mind, once fragmented by conflicting desires and the pull of circumstance, now functions as a cohesive, directed force. Desire has been tempered into burning intent, belief has been forged through repeated emotionally charged instruction, decision has replaced hesitation, imagination has been trained to strategize rather than wander. Discipline now governs action automatically. Persistence has become identity. These forces, acting in harmony, constitute an internal machinery so powerful that obstacles appear not as barriers but as instruments to refine capability. The individual begins to perceive the world as a canvas where mental authority determines outcomes, and fear has no purchase because it is acknowledged, only to be overridden by conscious purpose. At this stage, the subtler eyes of human thought and emotion become starkly apparent. Hill noted that the subconscious mind accepts whatever is impressed upon it with consistency and emotion. This is why the untrained mind defaults to limitation, because fear, doubt, and habit have been repeatedly impressed over decades. The trained mind, however, directs every impression deliberately, transforming every thought into leverage for achievement. Every rehearsal, every visualization, every act of focused attention impresses a pattern that the subconscious executes without hesitation. Fear ceases to be an invisible antagonist. It becomes merely a historical note, powerless against the precision of deliberate mental governance. The individual now experiences the first profound manifestations of what Hill called the invisible forces. Events begin to align not by chance, but by law. Circumstances that once seemed random now reflect the internal order of the mind. Opportunities arrive not through luck, but through alignment with purpose, reinforced by persistence and decisive action. Assistance, sometimes from unexpected quarters, appears not as coincidence, but as the predictable response of the law to consistent, directed thought. Every success and setback is interpreted not emotionally, but as feedback, a message from the law that indicates alignment or deviation. Persistence at this stage ceases to be an effortful act. It has been internalized as identity. The individual does not persist because motivation NDS it or because fear compels it. Persistence is automatic, the default expression of alignment with purpose. Hill observed that the majority of failures occur not because of incapacity, but because of mental resignation long before physical action ceases. When persistence becomes instinct, the mind continues to act with precision through delays, criticism, and obstacles. Temporary defeat becomes a signal to adjust, not a verdict of incapacity. Imagination now operates as an engine of strategic foresight. No longer a playground for fantasy, it synthesizes experience, analysis, and insight to create actionable solutions. The individual anticipates challenges before they arise, conceptualizes responses, and visualizes the execution of plans with a clarity so precise that the subconscious treats these rehearsals as lived experience. Hill taught that imagination, when disciplined and informed by desire and belief, produces insight that appears spontaneous, yet is the direct consequence of rigorous mental conditioning. Fear is neutralized in this process because it cannot distort rehearsed precision. Decision, reinforced by discipline and persistence, becomes the point at which thought translates into unassailable action. Indecision, once a paralyzing factor, has been eradicated because hesitation is identified instantly and corrected through conscious governance. The mind does not wait for external confirmation or validation. It recognizes only alignment with purpose and acts accordingly. This decisiveness fuels momentum, which Hill identified as the single most critical factor in translating internal mastery into visible achievement. Momentum, once established, renders external resistance increasingly irrelevant. The disciplined mind also develops extraordinary clarity in evaluating opportunities and risks. Where fear once magnified threats and exaggerated challenges, faith and belief now provide calibration. The individual distinguishes between real hazards and imagined ones, between necessary caution and paralyzing doubt. This clarity transforms every decision into a vector for growth. Delay is minimized, efficiency is maximized, and energy is preserved for execution rather than internal conflict. Hill insisted that the majority of people fail not due to external conditions, but because their minds misinterpret circumstance, acting on fear rather than principle. At this level, self-discipline has evolved into structural authority over life itself. The individual regulates not only thought and action, but also environment, relationships, and consumption of information. Every element of daily experience is evaluated for alignment with purpose. Idle conversation, trivial entertainment, and unproductive habits are minimized because they dilute the intensity required to maintain mental and emotional cohesion. The mind becomes a fortress of concentrated effort, defended against distraction, indulgence, and internal sabotage. Faith now dominates the eye. Neural landscape completely. Fear is acknowledged only to be rendered powerless. Hill observed that faith is the chemical fuel of achievement. It transforms desire into certainty, aligns the subconscious with intention, and neutralizes the paralyzing influence of doubt. The individual at this stage has internalized faith to the extent that every action, every rehearsal, every plan is conducted under its authority. This internal dominance manifests externally as decisiveness, clarity, and consistent execution. Persistence, imagination, decision, and discipline converge to create a form of mental momentum that Hill described as irresistible. The individual moves through challenges not by luck or fortitude alone, but because internal alignment generates force proportional to purpose. Circumstances begin to yield predictably. Opposition, once a source of fear, becomes a tool for refinement. Criticism and delay are interpreted as messages to adjust strategy rather than as barriers. The individual experiences the inevitability of law in motion. Results begin to manifest according to intensity, consistency, and precision of mental direction. The invisible forces of the mind, once theoretical, now operate as measurable and reliable mechanisms. The subconscious executes instruction without deviation. Thought precedes circumstance. Action is precise. Opportunity, insight, and collaboration appear not by chance, but by law. Hill emphasized that those who achieve wealth and success are inherently luckier or smarter. They are more precise, more disciplined, and more persistent in applying the law governing the mind. Yet the internal landscape demands vigilance. The mind, even when disciplined, will be tested. Subtle fear, doubt, and distraction will attempt re-entry, often in forms disguised as curiosity, indulgence, or comfort. Hill warned that the law does not forgive neglect. Alignment must be maintained continuously. Temporary relaxation is enough to allow old patterns to reassert themselves, weakening momentum and inviting hesitation. The disciplined individual recognizes these tests instantly and corrects course through renewed focus, repetition of principle, and conscious reinforcement of purpose. At this juncture, internal mastery translates increasingly into external results. The individual becomes a vessel of consistent, deliberate action aligned with purpose. Effort is efficient, energy is concentrated, and results manifest predictably. Hill observed that wealth, influence, and achievement are not rewards. They are signals, reflections of internal alignment. External success is not accidental. It is inevitable when internal law operates with clarity, intensity, and persistence. By now, the individual begins to perceive that fear is no longer an enemy, but a signal. It marks areas where attention must be reinforced, where discipline must be applied, where alignment must be recalibrated. It no longer commands, it informs. This marks the crucial P. Psychological shift. Fear has been subordinated, but the mind is aware of its presence and uses it strategically rather than reactively. At this stage, imagination is fully harnessed. Creative problem solving, strategic foresight, and innovative planning become automatic consequences of disciplined thought. The mind does not react blindly. It calculates, predicts, and executes. The subconscious mind, programmed through autosuggestion and persistent rehearsal, functions as a silent co-creator, delivering insights, opportunities, and solutions that appear as inspiration but are, in truth, the natural outcome of deliberate alignment. Decision, discipline, persistence, and imagination are now intertwined into a cohesive operational system. Each element reinforces the others, producing internal momentum and external manifestation. The individual no longer acts reactively but proactively, shaping circumstances with mental authority. Every delay, every obstacle, every challenge is absorbed into the system and converted into leverage. Hill described this as the threshold of mastery, when internal law governs all action and external results become inevitable reflections of that internal governance. The internal architecture of belief, desire, discipline, decision, imagination, and persistence now functions as a single integrated engine. The subconscious mind executes instruction with precision. The conscious mind directs with clarity, and external reality responds with alignment. The individual experiences the psychological intensity of law and motion, momentum, inevitability, and unassailable internal authority. This is the fourth stage, the point at which thinking, feeling, and acting converge into disciplined, relentless, and inevitable manifestation of purpose. The fifth stage is where the internal law begins to crystallize into measurable, unstoppable reality, where thought, desire, belief, and persistence combine with action to produce results that can no longer be ignored. At this point, the individual has transcended mere theory, mere planning, and even mere disciplined thought. They are no longer experimenting with principles, they are living them. Napoleon Hill made it clear that it is in this stage that success begins to manifest outwardly, because the internal machinery is no longer passive. It operates with precision, momentum, and inevitability. The mind, once scattered, is now a singular instrument of execution, focused with absolute clarity on a definite purpose. Every action reinforces belief. Every rehearsal of thought fortifies desire. Every decision executed sharpens momentum. Every obstacle encountered is processed as feedback, never as defeat. Persistence has become identity. It is no longer a conscious effort to resist fear or maintain focus. It is the natural expression of purpose. The individual does not experience resistance as a barrier, but as information. Temporary setbacks are signals, and delay is a rehearsal for refinement. Hill observed that the majority of failures occur because the individual stops mentally long before action ceases. At this fifth stage, the mind no longer quits. It does not negotiate with circumstances, emotion, or delay. It continues relentlessly, quietly, and without fanfare. Momentum accumulates not because the world has shifted in favor of the individual, but because the mind is aligned with the invisible laws governing achievement. Faith is absolute here. It is no longer merely cultivated through repetition or visualization. It has been proven through daily disciplined execution. The individual has experienced the law responding to internal direction, and this evidence reinforces belief to a degree that fear becomes inconsequential. Doubt may arise, but it cannot penetrate the fortified mind. Hill emphasized that faith is not a mystical force. It is the predictable consequence of aligned thought, emotional intensity, and disciplined action. At this stage, the mind is so trained that belief operates mechanically, producing decisive action without hesitation or negotiation. Decision, once a challenge, now asserts itself as the baseline for every choice. Indecision has been eliminated because the mind recognizes that hesitation is the enemy of momentum. Every decision, whether minor or significant, is filtered through the lens of purpose, evaluated against the defined goal, and executed with precision. Hill noted that this decisiveness is the hallmark of every individ. Who achieves extraordinary success. The ability to make rapid, informed, and unyielding decisions distinguishes the mind of the master from the mind of the average. Imagination functions now as a sophisticated instrument, synthesizing strategy, innovation, and foresight. Problems that would have once generated fear or anxiety are now processed as exercises in creative mastery. The mind anticipates challenges, conceptualizes solutions, and rehearses execution, training the subconscious to act as an active partner in creation rather than a passive observer. The subconscious mind now generates insight, inspiration, and solutions in real time, translating internal alignment into practical results. Hill called this the operationalization of imagination, the stage at which mental rehearsal produces tangible action, insight, and opportunity. The invisible forces described by Hill are fully engaged at this stage. Thought, emotion, and belief combine with disciplined action to produce results that cannot be dismissed as chance. The individual experiences the law not as theory, but as mechanical reality. Opportunity, guidance, and cooperation appear predictably when internal alignment is maintained. Hill insisted that those who achieve extraordinary results do so not because of external favor, luck, or intelligence, but because they have mastered these forces internally. Success becomes inevitable, not miraculous. Yet the fifth stage carries a subtle but crucial challenge: vigilance. CE against internal complacency. Small victories, early results, or even minor recognition can lull the mind into relaxation. Hill warned that the subconscious, if neglected, can revert to old patterns of fear, doubt, and hesitation. The disciplined individual maintains continuous alignment through repetition, reinforcement, and deliberate attention. Every day becomes an opportunity to strengthen the internal machinery. Every interaction, every thought, and every choice is evaluated for its contribution to momentum. The law does not pause for convenience. It responds impartially to the current state of internal alignment. Self-discipline at this point is both habitual and strategic. It is no longer imposed as effortful willpower, but is embedded into daily routines, environment, and habits. Every action, every decision, every rehearsal of thought is conducted within a framework designed to maintain alignment with purpose. Hill emphasized that those who achieve mastery understand that environment, relationships, and habits must all reinforce internal law. The disciplined mind constructs life itself as an instrument of alignment, protecting against distraction, indulgence, and regression. Fear has been neutralized not by elimination, but by subordination. It exists as a faint echo, a historical residue, but it no longer dictates behavior. The mind recognizes fear as data, not as command. Doubt and hesitation are processed through principle and purpose rather than emotion. The individual has trained the subconscious to respond to the intensity, clarity, and consistency of directed thought, ensuring that internal law governs all action and reaction. Hill observed that this is the psychological threshold at which extraordinary achievement becomes not only possible, but inevitable. Persistence, imagination, decision, discipline, faith, and desire converge at this stage to produce unassailable momentum. Each element reinforces the others, creating an internal ecosystem in which thought translates directly into outcome. Temporary setbacks are absorbed into the system, processed, and converted into leverage. The individual experiences a profound internal authority where hesitation is rare, fear is irrelevant, and action is decisive. Hill described this as the stage where the mind begins to operate as an unstoppable engine, translating internal mastery into external manifestation. At this point, opportunity no longer feels random. Circumstances are interpreted as signals and instruments for further alignment. Assistance, collaboration, and insight appear consistently as the subconscious acts in concert with conscious purpose. The individual begins to perceive the world as responsive rather than hostile, as malleable rather than fixed. The law responds predictably, and results reflect the intensity, clarity, and persistence of internal command. Hill emphasized that mastery of this stage is rare precisely because it requires unyielding attention to thought, emotion, and action over prolonged periods with no compromise, no excuses, and no delay. The fifth stage also reveals the subtle interplay between internal mastery and external influence. While internal law governs the mind, external conditions provide feedback, refinement, and opportunity. Every challenge becomes an instrument for sharpening skill, every delay a rehearsal for precision, and every criticism an opportunity to reinforce internal alignment. The individual no longer reacts emotionally to circumstance, but evaluates, adapts, and executes strategically. This psychological posture ensures that the law operates continuously, producing results proportionate to intention and effort. By now, the individual's identity is inseparable from internal law. Persistence, decision, imagination, discipline, desire, and faith are not exercises. They are the governing principles of being. Action, thought, and emotion are coordinated, forming a seamless engine that translates internal authority into tangible outcome. External manifestation, wealth, influence, mastery, opportunity, is now the predictable reflection of internal alignment. Hill emphasized that extraordinary achievement is not a product of chance or external favor, but the inevitable consequence of internal law exercised with precision, consistency, and intensity. The subtlety of this stage lies in vigilance. Momentum must be preserved. Fear, doubt, and distraction continue to test internal alignment, though their influence is greatly diminished. Hill warned that even disciplined minds can falter if the law is neglected or treated casually. Reinforcement through repetition, action, and conscious alignment is required to maintain operational integrity. The fifth stage is as much about maintaining the engine as it is about producing results. At this threshold, internal mastery and external manifestation are in dynamic equilibrium. The individual no longer wonders if the law works. They see it operating in real time. Obstacles are neutralized, resistance is redirected, and opportunity aligns predictably. Thought has become precise, desire is absolute, belief is mechanical, decision is decisive, imagination is strategic, discipline is habitual, and persistence is instinct. The law functions as a system, producing results in exact proportion to the alignment and intensity of mental governance. This is the stage where extraordinary success is tangible but requires absolute adherence to principle. Every day is a deliberate exercise in alignment. Every thought, word, and action is evaluated for contribution to momentum. Hill emphasized that those who reach this stage distinguish themselves not by brilliance alone, but by the relentless, disciplined, and continuous application of internal law. Complacency is the only enemy capable of undermining momentum. Fear, doubt, and hesitation have been neutralized. Only neglect remains a threat. The fifth stage, therefore, is the crucible of internal mastery made manifest. It is the point where the individual can no longer deny the power of thought, belief, and deliberate action. Success is now a predictable outcome, not a hope. The mind functions as a single, unified engine. Obstacles are absorbed and transformed into leverage. The law responds with inevitability. Momentum has been established. The individual stands on the cusp of final mastery, ready to convert this internal authority into sustained, undeniable, and decisive external achievement. Now, at the sixth and final stage, the law demands nothing short of total internal authority. The individual stands at the threshold of ultimate responsibility, the point where thought, desire, faith, discipline, decision, imagination, and persistence converge into unstoppable momentum. Where the internal machinery functions with precision and external manifestation is inevitable. Here, the full weight of personal accountability becomes unavoidable. There is no longer room for excuse, for delay, for hesitation. Success is no longer theoretical. It is the natural outcome of deliberate alignment. The individual must confront themselves fully, acknowledge the magnitude of their inner power, and accept that external conditions are reflections, not determinants of destiny. At this stage, fear is no longer a master. It is a distant observer, a faint echo from the past. Doubt no longer constrains action. Hesitation is a historical anomaly. The subconscious mind has been trained, programmed, and impressed with clarity, intensity, and unwavering purpose. Every thought is deliberate, every decision decisive, every action consistent. Momentum flows effortlessly because the law, now fully internalized, responds to alignment with mechanical precision. Hill observed that the moment of absolute internal mastery is terrifying to those unprepared because it demands complete ownership of one's mind, one's actions, and one's results. Faith has become irreducible. It is no longer cultivated. It is proven. The individual has witnessed the law respond to persistent, disciplined, and precise thought. Belief operates as automatic guidance, driving decision, refining imagination, and reinforcing persistence without the need for external confirmation. Fear, doubt, and distraction exist only as signals, never as commands. The mind now functions as a unified engine of creation, converting every thought, very rehearsal, and every decision into momentum and visible manifestation. Hill emphasized that this is the essence of extraordinary achievement. Internal mastery produces inevitable outcomes. Imagination now operates as an instrument of relentless precision. Strategic foresight, problem solving, and innovation are no longer optional or creative exercises. They are automatic products of disciplined mental training. Challenges are anticipated, rehearsed, and neutralized before they arise. The subconscious mind, now a fully operational partner, generates insights and solutions spontaneously, translating internal clarity into tangible outcomes. The individual experiences these moments as inspiration, but they are not mystical. They are the inevitable consequence of the law operating at full capacity. Decision is no longer reactive, it is declarative. Indecision has been eliminated because the mind recognizes hesitation as a deviation from purpose. Every choice is filtered through internal alignment and executed without compromise. This decisiveness fuels momentum, creating a compounding force that renders obstacles irrelevant. Hill described this as the point where thought crystallizes into action and action produces results with predictable certainty. Momentum, once established, makes external resistance powerless. Persistence, now identity, ensures that the engine of the mind operates continuously. Temporary setbacks are absorbed as feedback, not defeat. Delays and criticism are integrated into the system, enhancing strategy and refining execution. Every action is a reinforcement of alignment, and every obstacle becomes a tool for growth. The individual has internalized that persistence is not effort. It is the natural state of a mind operating under law. Hill observed that most fail before this stage not due to lack of capacity, but because they cease mentally before action ends. At this juncture, the invisible forces described by Hill manifest unmistakably. Circumstance, opportunity, insight, and cooperation align consistently with the intensity, clarity, and persistence of internal direction. Success is no longer chance, it is inevitable. Wealth, influence, recognition, and mastery are reflections of internal law, not external favor. The individual experiences a profound truth, thought precedes reality, belief directs action, and disciplined persistence produces results. This is the power of internal mastery, the ability to shape external life through the governance of mind. Yet this stage carries its final, most profound responsibility, unwavering commitment. Complacency is the only remaining threat. Even minor neglect of thought, repetition, or alignment can allow old patterns of fear, doubt, or hesitation to regain influence. Hill emphasized that internal mastery demands continuous, deliberate reinforcement. Every day, every interaction, every thought must be governed with purpose, intensity, and focus. The law does not pause, it acts impartially, responding to alignment and intensity with precision. The individual must remain vigilant, disciplined, and deliberate at all times. The culmination of all principles, desire, belief, faith, autosuggestion, decision, imagination, persistence, discipline, is now operational as a single coherent system. Internal momentum flows without interruption. Fear is neutralized. Doubt is irrelevant. The mind operates as an engine, translating every thought into purposeful action and every action into inevitable consequence. External manifestation, whether wealth, mastery, or influence, is now a predictable reflection of internal alignment. Hill taught that this is the ultimate threshold. Mastery over mind produces mastery over circumstance. And now comes the decisive moment. Awareness alone is not enough. Understanding alone does not produce results. Knowledge without execution is useless. Every moment spent hesitating, questioning, or relinquishing authority weakens momentum. Hill insisted that extraordinary success requires total ownership of one's thoughts, one's emotions, one's decisions, and one's actions. There is no external authority that can substitute for this. There is no secret that bypasses personal responsibility. The law responds only to precise, consistent, and intense internal alignment. You must now commit, not partially, not conditionally, not tomorrow. You must decide that from this moment forward, every thought will be deliberate, every decision decisive, every action aligned with purpose. You must refuse to negotiate with fear, hesitation, doubt, or distraction. You must maintain relentless internal discipline and sustain momentum without compromise. You must impress upon your subconscious mind, with repeated emotional intensity, that the goal is non-negotiable, that success is inevitable, and that internal law governs all outcomes. This is the point of no return, the moment where thinking becomes destiny, where faith, belief, and desire are no longer abstract principles, but living, governing forces, where persistence, discipline, imagination, and decision converge into unstoppable momentum. The law is impartial, mechanistic, and inevitable. It responds to internal alignment with precision. External conditions no longer control you, your mind does. The world becomes a reflection of the internal order you maintain, and success is no longer optional. It is unavoidable. So act decisively. Command your thoughts, direct your mind, harness your imagination, strengthen your faith, rehearse, repeat, and reinforce until momentum is irreversible. Persist when every impulse urges retreat. Decide when uncertainty tempts hesitation. Discipline yourself when convenience calls for compromise. Accept fear as information, not command. Align every element of thought, emotion, and action with your definite purpose and allow the invisible law to operate through you with relentless precision. This is the law Napoleon Hill revealed. This is the path to mastery. This is the moment where thought becomes power, belief becomes action, and desire becomes reality. The choice is yours, unshakable and undeniable. Will you assume total authority over your mind and your destiny, or will you remain a passive observer in your own life? There is no middle ground. There is no delay. There is only action, alignment, and total responsibility. Step fully into this law, commit without compromise, and live the life dictated not by circumstance, luck, or opinion, but by the unstoppable, invincible, and precise power of your own disciplined mind. The time to act is now. Relinquish nothing, fear nothing, persist relentlessly, decide absolutely, align completely, command your mind, own your life, master yourself, and through this mastery, manifest your purpose with the inevitability of law. This is no longer theory. This is execution. This is destiny. This is the moment when your mind seizes control and nothing external can resist the force you have created.